There's a reason some homes feel heavy the moment you step inside. No arguments, no clutter, no noise, yet something lingers. And then there are homes where opportunities seem to land on the doorstep uninvited, where money flows, health stabilizes, and life just works. It's not magic, it's not luck, and it's not some ancient superstition passed down blindly. It's structure, it's placement, it's what your home is quietly broadcasting about your readiness to receive. Energy doesn't ask who you are, how much you earn, or what you hope for. It responds to what you've arranged, what you've allowed, and what you've overlooked. Right now, your furniture, your forgotten corners, and even the objects sitting behind your door may be shaping your financial life more than your effort or ambition. Not because they're cursed, but because in Feng Shui, form creates function, and the wrong forms invite blockages you never see coming. That decorative mirror facing your entrance, it may be bouncing away every opportunity that tries to reach you. That unused chair pressed against the wall for 5 years, it may be anchoring an area of your life that hasn't moved forward in just as long. Today, on New Day Mindfulness, we're diving deep, not into superstition, not into fear, but into the subtle logic of home energy and the 11 mistakes silently draining your wealth potential. These aren't big renovations. These are small misalignments with massive ripple effects. Things most people never notice, but their bank accounts certainly feel. Before we begin, I want to invite you to be part of this energy shift with me. If you've ever sensed that your environment holds more power than people give it credit for, if you've ever rearranged one thing and suddenly felt clarity return or money unexpectedly arrive, then you already understand the power we're about to uncover. So before we explore these 11 game-changing shifts, please take a moment to support this journey. Click like if you're ready to see your home differently. Hit subscribe so we can grow this channel and bring even deeper Feng Shui insights to more people. Share this video with someone who needs a breakthrough, someone whose efforts are strong, but whose energy flow is blocked. Help me reach our goal of 2,000 followers so I can keep sharing practical, grounded, and transformative content, rooted in real Feng Shui logic. This isn't about belief, it's about flow, and your home already knows the difference. Let's begin. Number 1, entrance energy leak, the mouth of your fortune. In classical Feng Shui, the entrance of a home is far more than just a physical boundary. It is energetically considered the mouth of Qi, the primary gateway through which all forms of opportunity, wealth, and vitality enter your living space. When this area is obstructed, misaligned, or neglected, the effects ripple inward like a river blocked at its source. Energy in its purest form behaves just like water. It seeks movement, clarity, and direction. But the moment your front entrance becomes congested or confused in its design, energy pauses, disperses, or reverses its course, often without you realizing it. And with it, your wealth potential, clarity, and momentum retreat as well. Let's begin with the most common but underestimated problem: clutter. Many people instinctively drop their shoes, bags, mail, umbrellas, and shopping items near the front door, thinking of it as a transitional zone. But in Feng Shui, this habitual dumping ground becomes a block, a stop sign that tells wealth. You're not welcome to settle here. Piles of shoes especially symbolize disorder and chaotic movement. In energy terms, every pair of shoes represents a journey, an external energy. When those journeys accumulate in a pile, they don't just look messy, they create friction. That friction disturbs incoming Qi and disperses its focus. It's not merely about tidiness, it's about giving space for movement to become flow. A clear entrance signals readiness to receive. A blocked one repels before the door even opens. Then there's the issue of mirrors, an interior design element that, when used improperly, can be devastating to energetic flow. One of the most common placement errors is positioning a mirror directly opposite the front door. While many people believe this makes the space feel bigger or brighter, in Feng Shui, this is akin to placing a no entry sign in front of opportunity. The mirror literally bounces energy back out the moment it attempts to enter. Think of someone knocking at your door and being met not by a warm welcome, but a reflection of themselves. Would they feel invited to stay? Mirrors facing the door act in exactly that way. They create a visual and energetic rebound. The result? Stagnation, missed chances, financial cold spots. But if you still want a mirror in the foyer, angling it to reflect inward rather than outward can redirect and retain energy within the home. Mirrors are amplifiers. What they reflect, they magnify. So make sure they reflect light, calmness, or abundance, not absence or escape routes. Lighting is another crucial yet often overlooked factor in entrance energy. Dim lighting by the front door, especially in the evening, creates what Feng Shui considers yin-heavy pockets, zones that slow movement, dull perception, and invite sluggishness into the home. This isn't merely metaphorical. Humans are biologically wired to respond to light. When your entrance is shadowed or poorly lit, your body and brain register a sense of caution or depletion. From an energy perspective, wealth is like a guest. Would a guest feel invited to approach a dark, unwelcoming entryway? Most wouldn't. That's why entrance lighting must be warm, visible from outside, and symbolically alive. Soft golden tones, lantern-shaped fixtures, or even flame-resembling bulbs carry yang energy, inviting, dynamic, and protective. When guests and opportunities arrive, they're greeted with brightness, clarity, and a sense of arrival. Now let's move to one of the most symbolically potent yet underestimated features, the doormat. This isn't just a spot to wipe your feet, it is energetically the handshake of your home. A worn, faded, or overly neutral doormat sends a subconscious message of low intention. But when you place a red or gold-toned mat, colors associated with vitality, prosperity, and warmth in Feng Shui, you communicate, both visually and energetically, that abundance is welcome here. It's not about being flashy, it's about setting a tone, an energetic imprint that signals your readiness to host good fortune. And if that mat includes an intentional symbol, such as the word welcome, a prosperity symbol, or a pattern inspired by nature, it acts as a spiritual threshold. Each step across it becomes a micro-ritual of entry. Next, we consider the material conditions surrounding the entrance. Squeaky hinges, difficult locks, chipped paint, broken doorbells. While these seem like small inconveniences, in Feng Shui, they are signs of delayed response and blocked reception. If your door is hard to open, it means opportunity must struggle to reach you. If your doorbell doesn't ring, messages of abundance go unheard. If your entrance feels outdated or neglected, it reflects your readiness for growth, or lack thereof. The door must not just open, it must open easily, fully, and preferably inward. That inward movement matters. It represents your openness to receiving. An inward swinging door energetically invites the world in, while an outward swinging one subtly pushes it away. There's also a symbolic alignment to be aware of, the door-to-stair configuration. If you open your front door and are immediately met with a staircase going downward, this represents qi and your wealth, or cascading it out of the home. Energy flows downward quickly and is harder to retain. The remedy? A low wooden divider, a tall plant, or a strategically placed console table can slow and soften this downward movement, giving energy a place to land before dispersing. Conversely, if stairs go upward right at the entrance, it can create a pressure of ambition, always climbing, never resting. In either case, introducing stability and visual balance through art, light, or structural breaks helps temper the extremes. Color psychology also plays a role in entrance energy. While the ideal color depends on the home's facing direction and elemental alignment, wood, fire, earth, metal, water, in general, tones that feel earthy, stable, and warm support entrance flow. Black or blue doors may suit water-dominant spaces but can feel too heavy or introspective in earth-oriented layouts. Bright white, associated with metal, brings purity but can also feel sterile. A warm, natural wood tone or deep red is often considered the most universally auspicious as it combines stability with vibrancy. Yang energy that says, this home is awake, on alert, and prepared for growth. Another overlooked but energetically vital element is the use of scent. The first breath of a home matters, just like the first impression of a person. Stale, musty, or overly synthetic smells near the entrance create subtle resistance. but introducing soft, natural scents like citrus, sandalwood, or basil can create an energetic pull. Scents travel faster than light or sound in how they reach the brain. That means even before your mind processes what it sees, your subconscious has already formed a feeling about the space based on how it smells. In Feng Shui, the entrance is not just about vision, it's a multi-sensory gateway. If you want to invite in abundance, make sure the breath of your home is clean, bright, and full of life. Finally, let's touch on movement. The entrance should feel dynamic, not dead. A hanging ornament that sways gently, such as a wind chime, a red tassel, or a decorative lantern, encourages qi to activate. It creates a moment of movement that stirs the energy field. But be careful, too much motion, such as loud or overly fast-moving objects, creates dispersal rather than focus. The key is subtle stimulation, like a gentle wake-up to the energy entering the space. In summary, the entrance of your home is not just a transitional space, it is a declaration. It tells the universe whether you are ready to receive or not. A blocked entrance signals disinterest. A mirror facing the door sends energy back where it came from. Dim lighting makes it retreat. But when the entrance is clean, bright, warmly lit, scented with care, and symbolically welcoming, it becomes a magnet for good energy, wealth, and opportunity. You don't need to remodel your home to change your life. Sometimes all it takes is moving a mirror, clearing a corner, and letting the light in. Energy doesn't force itself into a home. It waits for an invitation, and your entrance is that invitation. What is it saying right now? Number 2, dead spaces, dark corners that hold nothingness. In the language of classical Feng Shui, where every structure breathes energy and every spatial configuration sends a silent signal to the universe, there exists a concept that is frequently underestimated but profoundly impactful: the dead corner. These are the spaces within our homes that lie dormant, often unlit, unattended, and forgotten. Not because they are invisible, but because we've mentally disengaged from them. Yet ironically, these dead corners often hold an outsized influence over the flow of life force, or qi, throughout the entire space. These zones don't just collect dust, they collect energetic inertia. They are the still ponds of your home, where movement ceases and accumulation begins. And in Feng Shui, wherever there is no movement, there can be no progress. In these dead pockets, prosperity halts, creativity dulls, and clarity fades. A dark, unutilized corner may seem harmless, even aesthetically neutral, but energetically it acts like a vacuum. Rather than moving qi in an upward expansive motion, which is essential for generating growth, income, and insight, these spaces absorb and trap it. If the rest of the home is organized like a network of flowing rivers, the dead corner becomes a swamp, unmoving, heavy, and fertile, not for fortune, but for stagnation. The result is not always visible, but it is deeply felt. Difficulty making decisions, delayed business opportunities, unexplained fatigue, or a household that just doesn't seem to wake up. It's no coincidence that people with stagnant corners often report a general sense of waiting for money, for motivation, for movement. That waiting is not just circumstantial, it is a spatial reflection of what the home is holding, or more accurately, not holding. To bring these spaces back to life, we need to reintroduce vertical movement. Feng Shui views upward flow as symbolic of progress, ambition, and expansion. That's why one of the most potent solutions for dead corners is the placement of upward-facing light. Unlike downward lights, which press energy toward the ground and accentuate the heaviness of the space, an uplight activates yang energy, warm, dynamic, transformative. Think of it as a beacon, a flare that signals movement where there was once stillness. Floor lamps with soft gold or warm white light are ideal. If electricity isn't easily accessible, battery-operated lanterns or candle-shaped LED fixtures can serve the same purpose, so long as they create a visual sense of lift. Another effective remedy is the inclusion of a living object, ideally a plant with upward-reaching foliage. Why a plant? Because it represents 3 of the 5 key elements in Feng Shui: wood, the plant itself; water, used to nourish it; and earth, the soil. A plant not only brings visual life, but literal life to the space. It breathes, it moves subtly with the air, and it grows. These qualities invite the qi to activate, but not just any plant will do. Avoid spiky or thorned varieties in these zones as they carry sharp or cutting energy, known as sha qi, which can introduce tension rather than balance. Opt for bamboo, money trees, peace lilies, or jade plants, species known for their soft yet strong energetic profiles. Position the plant slightly off-center so it doesn't dominate, but rather contributes to the sense of upward flow. If natural sunlight is lacking, choose low-light plants or complement them with artificial grow lighting. Dead corners that receive no light and host no life are essentially echo chambers for energetic decay. Now consider how often these dead spaces are filled not with intention, but with storage. Boxes, forgotten furniture, stacks of items we plan to sort later. That later rarely comes. And every day that clutter sits, it creates not just visual weight, but directional confusion. Energy, like water, must know where to go. If you leave a corner packed with unlabeled bins, random paperwork, or broken electronics, you are telling qi to avoid the area altogether. Worse, you're sending a message that you're holding on, emotionally and energetically, to things that no longer serve a function. Feng Shui is not about minimalism, but it is about clarity. A dead corner overrun with storage becomes a metaphor for indecision. It reflects to the subconscious, I don't know where this belongs. And that reflection begins to mirror itself in your life. Unfiled taxes, missed deadlines, stalled ideas, relationships you can't seem to resolve. To transform this, you must first clear. That means more than tidying. It means making an energetic decision. What stays? What goes? What purpose the space will now serve? Once cleared, introduce an intentional object that suggests activity or focus. A small bookshelf with neatly arranged titles about wealth or wellness. A decorative water feature, such as a still bowl with floating petals or stones that reflects light and soft motion. A statue representing a figure of prosperity placed on a raised surface to lift the eye. These objects are not just decor, they are directional cues that tell qi, this space is no longer forgotten. Let's bring in a scientific parallel for those skeptical of ancient systems. Just as stagnant water becomes a breeding ground for mold and bacteria, stagnant space becomes a breeding ground for subconscious stress. In environmental psychology, researchers have long noted the phenomenon of dead zones in interior architecture, areas of low foot traffic, low visibility, and low interaction. These zones, when observed in office spaces, tend to correlate with lower employee morale, reduced innovation, and even interpersonal conflict. Translated to the home, these zones don't just go unnoticed. They contribute to a background noise of lethargy, confusion, and tension. The cure is not emotional, it is environmental. Movement must be reintroduced. Clarity must be restored. A corner that glows becomes a space that grows. Even sound can be used to reanimate these spaces. Hanging a delicate wind chime near an otherwise dead corner invites the air to interact with the space. As the chime responds, it awakens the energy around it. You may not even consciously register the sound after a while, but your space does. These tiny sonic movements act like acupuncture for the home. Not too loud, not too frequent, just enough to stimulate flow. Scent too has a role. In a dead corner, introducing a subtle, natural fragrance. Lavender, citrus, or sandalwood creates olfactory motion. Just as light stirs the eyes and sound stirs the ears, scent stirs the breath. Inhaling freshness where there was once nothingness is a sensory signal that says, this space is alive again. From an energetic standpoint, the more senses a space engages, the more dynamic and welcoming its energy becomes. Even the choice of color in these corners matters. Dead corners often appear cold, gray, or shadowed because of paint or lighting choices. Adding a warm-toned accent, whether through art, a floor cushion, or wall decor, can reframe the energy. Colors like amber, burnt orange, sage green, or soft gold stimulate grounded activation. They suggest a sunlit field rather than a forgotten basement. And in Feng Shui, this symbolic language matters. The eye receives color before it recognizes form. A warm corner is an active corner. In conclusion, dead corners are not just architectural artifacts. They are energetic liabilities. They are that unspoken culprits behind stalled projects, financial blocks, relationship fatigue, and emotional drift. Yet their cure does not require demolition or renovation. It requires observation, decision, and symbolic activation. Introduce life, stimulate vertical flow, clear the weight of confusion, reassign the space of purpose, and let that purpose signal movement, light, and openness. When your home is fully engaged, not just in its design, but in its energetic invitation, your life begins to reflect that engagement back. Because in Feng Shui, nothing in the home is neutral. It either contributes to your future or stalls it. Dead corners are not problems. They are opportunities disguised as silence. And when you bring light to what has long been dimmed, you don't just improve your space, you change your life's direction. Number 3, opposing doors where energy collides. In Feng Shui, where direction, placement, and energetic intent dictate the quality of flow throughout a space, there exists a phenomenon that many home owners completely overlook until its consequences begin to surface in subtle yet persistent forms. Fatigue that doesn't resolve, financial inconsistencies, inexplicable stress, or relational tension that feels out of proportion. This phenomenon stems from what practitioners refer to as opposing doors, or door conflict. Simply put, when two doors face one another directly, such as a bedroom door facing a bathroom, a kitchen entry aligned with a hallway, or a front door aligned with a back exit, they create an energetic condition where qi, the life force energy that nourishes the home, is not invited to settle, circulate, or stabilize. Instead, it rushes in one direction and escapes in another, often leading to what can be described as energetic whiplash. In practical terms, this means the energy entering your space doesn't have a chance to nourish the household. It enters with momentum, but finds itself immediately pulled toward an exit, dispersing the benefits it carries before they can take root. Let's start with the most common form of opposing doors, a bathroom facing a kitchen. This architectural choice, often born out of structural convenience or space constraints, carries one of the most disruptive energetic signatures in Feng Shui. The kitchen represents fire, nourishment, and wealth. It's a symbol of abundance, health, and the stability that comes from consistent daily sustenance. The bathroom, on the other hand, is ruled by water, not the kind that nourishes, but the kind that flushes away, that drains, that clears. When these two spaces face each other directly, particularly when the bathroom door is left open, you are creating an energetic narrative in which nourishment and wealth are literally being flushed away. It is a spatial metaphor that becomes a lived experience over time. Financial opportunities seem to disappear just as they appear. Eating habits deteriorate, or digestive and health issues become chronic. Feng Shui is not based on fear, but on pattern recognition. And in homes where this configuration exists, there is often a frustrating pattern of lack and instability despite effort and intention. Now let's examine another variation, bedroom doors that face one another, especially if they belong to rooms with different energetic purposes, such as a master bedroom and a guest room, or a parent's room and a child's room. When the doors are in direct line, qi moves too fast between them, creating a lack of privacy, psychological discomfort, and subtle interpersonal friction. People in those rooms may experience difficulty sleeping, feeling exposed, or unable to fully rest. The energy between them is not buffered, it collides. And that collision can manifest as miscommunication, overreaction, or an inexplicable feeling of being emotionally on edge. The solution isn't necessarily structural remodeling, but rather energetic buffering. By introducing soft dividers, such as a lightweight curtain, a tall plant, a decorative screen, or even a carefully placed piece of furniture, you disrupt the direct visual and energetic line. This allows energy to pause, to breathe, and to circulate instead of collide. Another high-impact configuration is when the front door aligns directly with the back door. This is one of the clearest examples of energy loss in the Feng Shui tradition. It's a structural expression of easy come, easy go. Energy that enters the home has no time to engage or nourish the space. It is pulled straight through like a breeze that offers no warmth. The home may look open and expansive, but energetically it becomes hollow. In such layouts, residents often feel like they're working hard, but seeing little long-term gain. Money may come in, but never accumulate. Relationships may start, but not deepen. Ideas may emerge, but not materialize. The energy moves, but it doesn't root. To counter this, you must create a place for qi to land. Placing an area rug, a coffee table, or a symbolic centerpiece between the two doors helps create an energetic pause button. It's like asking energy to stay a little longer, to offer something before it moves on. Hallways that funnel directly from one door to another present a similar problem. When a bedroom door sits directly across from a hallway that leads to another exit or a highly trafficked space, it can make rest feel impossible. The body may lie down, but the nervous system remains alert. Subconsciously, the space is always on watch, sensing movement, direction, and momentum that never quite stops. In such cases, the solution lies in visual interruption. Wall art, vertical decor, or texture changes, such as a patterned runner on the floor or a narrow console table, can slow the momentum of qi just enough to allow the room beyond to reclaim its intended function, whether that's rest, focus, or retreat. Another overlooked configuration involves closet doors that face entry doors, especially in bedrooms or home offices. Though less dramatic than bathroom or front-back door conflicts, this setup creates subtle energetic confusion. Closets hold what is hidden, stored, and often unresolved. When their doors are aligned directly with those meant to welcome or activate a space, the result is a subliminal mixing of intentions. You may feel distracted when trying to focus, or burdened when trying to relax. Once again, the cure is soft buffering. Earth-toned rugs, vertical mirrors, not facing the closet, but angled toward the center of the room, or grounding art can help redirect energy flow and preserve the clarity of function in each zone. One of the more insidious effects of opposing doors is the amplification of anxiety. While Feng Shui speaks of energy in terms of qi, modern neuroscience speaks in terms of cognitive load and environmental stressors. When you are constantly exposed to long sightlines with no endpoint, such as through multiple aligned doors, your brain doesn't rest. It constantly scans for meaning, movement, or action. This low-grade visual overstimulation contributes to decision fatigue, impatience, and an inability to stay present. In homes with many aligned doorways, children may have trouble focusing. Adults may feel exhausted by noon, and despite hours spent inside, no one feels truly at home. The goal of good Feng Shui isn't to reduce movement, but to guide it, to choreograph it in a way that supports well-being. Color and texture also play a role in resolving opposing door conflicts. Introducing earth elements, such as a rug in shades of terracotta, ochre, or muted gold, between two opposing doors helps ground energy and slow its speed. A thick fabric curtain, even if kept open most of the time, sends a visual cue that energy must curve rather than collide. Wood tones in furniture or flooring help create directional integrity, reminding energy where to settle rather than forcing it to sprint. And if mirrors are used near these doors, they must be positioned carefully, angled toward the heart of the room, not toward exits or other doors, to avoid energetic scattering. The symbolic remedies are just as important. Placing an image of a mountain, a still lake, or a tree between opposing doors helps establish rootedness. In Feng Shui, symbols are not decorations, they are energetic instructions. A mountain tells energy to slow and rest. A tree tells it to grow and rise. A lake tells it to gather and reflect. When placed intentionally between doorways, these images counteract the dispersing force of opposing door alignment. They suggest that movement here is not aimless. It is purposeful, restorative, and connected. In conclusion, opposing doors are not just architectural choices, they are energetic challenges that, when left unaddressed, lead to dissipation of wealth, disruption of rest, and confusion of purpose. But with intentional design, soft barriers, symbolic anchors, and practical layout shifts, you can redirect that chaotic motion into structured flow. Energy wants to serve your space. It simply needs the space to serve it in return. In Feng Shui, every passage is a message. Make sure the messages in your home say stay, nourish, and grow. Because the energy you allow to stay is the energy that has time to give. And the energy that collides and flees is the opportunity you may never see again. So align your doors, buffer your thresholds, and give your chi a reason to rest before it moves on. That's when the fortune you seek begins to stay. Number 4, kitchen faults, unseen wealth leaks. In the system of classical Feng Shui, the kitchen is not merely the place where meals are prepared. It is the energetic command center of nourishment, vitality, and most importantly, financial stability. In many traditional households throughout Asia, the kitchen has long been viewed as the wealth engine of the home, the space where the alchemy of fire transforms raw ingredients into sustenance and where the presence or absence of order and care directly correlates with the flow or leakage of abundance in one's life. Unlike the bedroom, which governs rest, or the living room, which represents social flow, the kitchen governs resource development. It is where energy is generated, not just consumed. And when this space is neglected, energetically misused, or physically disorganized, it doesn't just affect the body, it fractures the very structure through which wealth is received, stored, and expanded. Let's start with one of the most overlooked yet symbolically significant elements of kitchen design and habit: open trash bins. On a purely functional level, a trash can serves a vital role in daily hygiene. But in the energetic vocabulary of Feng Shui, leaving the trash can exposed, especially near the stove, sink, or food preparation areas, represents an open channel of decay placed directly within the wealth zone of the home. Every time you throw something away into an uncovered bin, especially while cooking or eating, you symbolically invite waste energy into the process of nourishment. It's a visual and energetic contradiction. The act of preparing food is about creation, transformation, and fortification. But if the very same area holds visible waste, both literal and energetic, you are telling the chi of wealth that it has no stable or sacred place to anchor. The solution is simple but non-negotiable. Use a covered bin, ideally placed away from the main cooking triangle, stove, sink, fridge, and ensure it is emptied regularly. The energy of garbage, if left to linger, doesn't just smell, it sticks to your environment and subtly your perception of what's possible. Next, let's examine the stove itself. In Feng Shui, the stove represents the fire element, one of the 5 foundational elements through which all energy flows are interpreted. Fire is passion, drive, visibility. It is the engine behind motivation and manifestation. The stove is considered a representation of your financial engine. A stove that is dirty, unused, or partially functioning sends a clear signal to the universe. Your ability to generate wealth is compromised. If one or more burners are out, it's not just a mechanical problem. It's an energetic bottleneck. Each burner is seen as a unique stream of income or opportunity. When one is not working, that stream is blocked. And if none are used consistently, your entire financial field enters a state of energetic dormancy. Keep your stove clean, not just because of hygiene, but because a bright, polished surface amplifies the fire element and invites consistent chi. Rotate your use of all burners, not just out of convenience, but as a symbolic reminder to diversify your income sources. Activate all channels of support and demonstrate to your space that you are ready to engage in full financial power. Consider next the issue of uncovered food. Many people have a habit of preparing meals and leaving ingredients out on the counter, dishes exposed, or cook meals sitting uncovered until serving. From a Feng Shui perspective, this habit disturbs the protective and nurturing energy of the kitchen. Food, once prepared, represents stored energy. It's not just nourishment for the body, but also a symbol of provision, family unity, and resource strength. Leaving it uncovered exposes that energy to chaos, movement, noise, disruption. It's a signal that your abundance is vulnerable, that your resources are unguarded. Always cover prepared food, not only to preserve freshness, but to symbolically seal in chi. Even a simple cloth or lid acts as an energetic container, preserving and protecting what you've created. In doing so, you shift the kitchen from being a reactive space to a generative one. Now we turn our attention to storage, specifically what you choose to place above your food preparation areas. One of the most critical Feng Shui violations in kitchens across modern homes is the placement of cleaning products, especially chemicals, bleach-based sprays, or synthetic detergents, directly above or adjacent to food. This is a direct clash of energy. Cleaning agents represent elimination, breakdown, and toxicity. Food represents nourishment, growth, and strength. When these two energies are stored within the same spatial plane, they create a subliminal battle in the field. Even if the products are sealed, their symbolic presence above rice, spices, or ingredients sends a conflicting message. It's like placing medicine and poison side by side without recognition of their influence. Always store cleaning supplies below waist level or in separate cabinets, preferably away from the stove or pantry. Let food be honored in a space of safety and elevation. This simple rearrangement can shift the energy of your kitchen from defensive to supportive. Clutter in the kitchen, particularly on the counters, is another invisible disruptor of qi. A countertop that is constantly filled with unused appliances, unopened mail, spice bottles, random utensils, and paperwork becomes not just an eyesore, but an obstacle. The countertop is the stage for transformation. When it is covered with unrelated items, the energy of transformation is suppressed. Clutter introduces static, and static kills flow. Keep counters open and intentional. Select 3 to 5 items that are both practical and symbolic. A wooden bowl of fresh fruit, symbolizing harvest, a clean kettle, symbolizing life-giving warmth, or a small vase of herbs, symbolizing organic growth. Everything else should have a home. Your kitchen does not need to look like a showroom, but it should speak clearly of nourishment, vitality, and rhythm. Refrigerator energy deserves its own attention. This is often the largest appliance in the room and functions as the vault of your home's nourishment. Yet many people allow their fridge interiors to become chaotic. Expired items, half-used sauces, sticky shelves, or food without labels. Just as a chaotic wallet reflects and reinforces disorganized finances, a chaotic fridge mirrors disorder in resource storage and future planning. Set a monthly reminder to purge, clean, and reorder. Use baskets or dividers to group foods by function. Daily staples, long-term ingredients, leftovers, indulgences. When you open your fridge and it feels clear, intentional, and alive, your body registers abundance. When you open it and feel confused or disgusted, your system contracts. One habit trains you to expect support. The other teaches you to tolerate depletion. Also crucial is how heat and water interact within the kitchen. In Feng Shui, fire and water are 2 opposing elements, necessary for life, but dangerous if not balanced. The sink and the stove, which represent these 2 forces, should not be directly opposite one another. When they are, it creates elemental conflict. You are symbolically telling your space that nourishment is being burned and cleansed simultaneously, an energy of disruption. If you cannot alter the layout, buffer the 2 with wood, a cutting board, a green plant, a bamboo tray, as wood is the element that balances fire and water. This isn't decoration, it's energetic diplomacy. And finally, the space above the stove. Many people hang items here, decorative tiles, spice racks, even calendars or clocks. But this space in Feng Shui is considered sacred air. It is where fire rises, where steam carries intention. Keep it open, clean, and reflective if possible. A mirrored backsplash here can double the fire energy, which doubles wealth flow. Just be sure that the mirror is always kept spotless, or it will reflect distortion instead of clarity. When all of these details come together, the covered trash, the functional burners, the clean counters, the sealed ingredients, the intentional colors, the respectful storage, you create a kitchen that does more than feed the body. You create a space that stabilizes your financial qi, uplifts your daily rhythm, and holds abundance like a living altar. In the end, the energy of wealth is not only found in banks or balance sheets, It's found in whether you bless or ignore the spaces that feed you. A kitchen that is chaotic reflects a life spent chasing. A kitchen that is aligned reflects a life that invites. And the difference between those two is often just a matter of how you treat what you have already been given. In Feng Shui, the kitchen doesn't just cook, it commands. And what it commands is determined by whether you see it as a task or as a temple. Number 5. Objects that represent brokenness. In Feng Shui, objects are not neutral. They do not simply exist as physical utilities or sentimental decorations. Each one, whether functional or broken, emits a message, subtle but powerful, into the energetic field of your home. When you allow cracked mirrors, broken electronics, malfunctioning lamps, or stopped clocks to linger in your space, you are not just tolerating inconvenience. You are embedding a frequency of incompletion and energetic distortion. These items do not passively occupy space. They reflect back instability, fragmentation, and energetic delay. And while your mind may rationalize their presence as unimportant, the subconscious reads them as declarations. This is a place where energy gets stuck. This is a space where clarity is compromised. This is a life where follow-through has stalled. In the language of Feng Shui, broken things become more than physical. They become symbolic anchors that pull qi into disrepair. Let's begin with mirrors, which in Feng Shui serve as one of the most potent tools for amplifying, redirecting, and clarifying energy. A clean, well-placed mirror can double abundance, expand the perception of space, and reflect positive movement. But a cracked mirror distorts. Its fractured surface breaks the image it holds, often imperceptibly warping whatever it reflects: your face, your doorway, your workspace. What does it mean when your reflection is split, fragmented, or distorted? Energetically, it communicates division, instability, and a loss of coherence. That vibration, subtle though it may be, it's absorbed into the field of the home. And what reflects as broken in the mirror begins to influence how opportunity, partnership, and decision-making are experienced in your life. In classical practice, cracked or chipped mirrors should be replaced immediately. Not hidden, not justified as still usable, not painted over, but removed and discarded with clarity and finality. To keep them is to keep the signal. I accept broken reflections. Clocks too are not mere timekeepers. They are directional instruments, guiding our rhythm, structure, and relationship to progress. A stopped clock sends a message that time is frozen, that progress has ceased, or that you are not aligned with the present moment. In the energetic framework of Feng Shui, time is movement. When a timepiece halts, so does the qi in its immediate field. This is especially dangerous when the stopped clock hangs in a space meant for action, like a kitchen, home office, or main hallway. Its energy pulls you subtly toward delay, stagnation, and indecision. You may find yourself procrastinating without understanding why, or experiencing a sensation of being stuck, as if days blend together and momentum refuses to return. This is not a psychological illusion. It is an energetic echo of what your environment has declared. Fix the clock or remove it. Do not tolerate non-functioning timekeepers in places where forward movement is essential. Electronics, from televisions to radios to routers, play a dual role. They are gateways of information, connection, and stimulation. But they are also frequent culprits of energetic noise. When they stop working, their presence shifts from dynamic to decaying. A broken television, for example, becomes a visual symbol of blocked communication. A broken lamp represents lost insight or obstructed vision. A dead phone charger sitting uselessly on a desk whispers that connection has failed. In the energetic vocabulary of your home, these are not passive malfunctions. They are energetic placeholders for dysfunction. Each broken item becomes a fragment, a static imprint that quietly reminds your space that something once worked here and no longer does. You may not see the cumulative weight of these fragments, but you feel them, particularly in emotional weariness, in the quiet dread of maintenance tasks you never start, and in the background hum of not enough that seems to cloud clarity and direction. Now consider the home of one of the world's most successful and disciplined individuals, Warren Buffett. Though a billionaire many times over, Buffett continues to live in the same modest house in Omaha, Nebraska, that he purchased in 1958. This isn't a symbolic gesture of humility, it's an intentional relationship with order. Buffett has often spoken about his need for clarity, for clean systems, and for functional simplicity. The lighting in his home is consistent. His clocks are accurate. There is no room for static, confusion, or unresolved breakdown. As he once put it, simplicity is clarity. Clarity is precision. And while he may not practice Feng Shui in the traditional sense, his space reflects an energetic discipline that aligns with its principles. Everything works and everything has purpose. There is no tolerance for decay. This is the standard you must adopt when examining the broken objects in your home. Do not see them as harmless or forgettable. See them as energetic splinters embedded in the flow of your space. Every item that no longer works as it was intended creates a pause in the chi field, an interruption, a hiccup, a dissonant note that accumulates with time. One stopped clock may be negligible, but three, plus a cracked mirror, plus a drawer of tangled, broken cords you'll deal with later, the weight begins to grow. And as it does, it changes the internal language of your space. Rooms feel heavier, goals feel delayed, energy feels sluggish. You may clean, redecorate, or light incense hoping to feel better. But as long as brokenness exists unaddressed, the chi cannot settle. It remains fragmented, like the objects reflecting its state. There is also a financial consequence to maintaining broken things. While people often justify delay in repairs due to budget concerns, the energetic reality is that broken items attract further financial stagnation. They represent deferred investment in your space. They mirror back a mindset of not yet, can't afford to, or it's not that bad. These beliefs, though seemingly practical, form the energetic narrative of limitation. Repairing a light fixture, replacing a clock battery, discarding an old blender, these are not just chores. They are declarations. They say, I respect the function of my home. I respond to disorder swiftly. I expect everything around me to work. And when your environment hears that message, it begins to echo it back through greater alignment, more timely support, and a clearer path forward. There's also an emotional layer to consider. Many people hold on to broken items out of guilt, nostalgia, or avoidance. The cracked picture frame from a trip long ago, the lamp gifted by someone now distant, the broken speaker from your college years. Each item holds a charge, not just because of its condition, but because of the unresolved emotion it carries. In Feng Shui, unresolved emotion is one of the most disruptive forces to spatial flow. It clings to corners, hides in drawers, and shapes the vibration of rooms without a single word being spoken. When you hold on to a broken item out of guilt, you are agreeing to house energetic tension. When you postpone repairs out of fear of expense, you are agreeing to sustain financial resistance. When you look at something daily that doesn't work and do nothing, you are telling your subconscious, it's okay to live in dysfunction. And over time, you start to believe it. Releasing or repairing broken items is not about perfection. It is about energetic agreement. What do you allow to surround you? What kind of message do you want your space to broadcast? A home that works supports a life that flows. A home that limps along with silent malfunctions slowly invites that same discord into its occupants. Functionality is not a luxury. It is the foundation for movement, clarity, and abundance. And Feng Shui doesn't require expensive upgrades. It requires response. Fix the lamp, replace the clock battery, toss the charger that hasn't worked in 2 years. Every time you do, you reclaim energetic control. You shift the pattern from tolerating delay to choosing alignment. And in that choice, wealth begins to hear you again. Because energy in the home doesn't wait for you to fix things. It reacts immediately to what is. If something is broken and overlooked, energy says, this is how we live now. If something is repaired with intention, energy says, we are ready for better. It is not about belief, it is about response. And the sooner you respond, the sooner your space and your life returns to function. Function creates flow. Flow attracts fortune. And fortune does not settle where brokenness is allowed to stay. It settles where clarity, precision, and intentional repair become the norm. The choice is always yours, and your space is always listening. Number 6, negative memory objects. Among the most overlooked yet deeply influential aspects of home energy in Feng Shui is the presence of emotionally charged objects, items that hold the energetic residue of past pain, failed relationships, loss, betrayal, or disappointment. These are the artifacts of memory we often display without question, keep out of habit, or store just in case, unaware of the ongoing impact they exert on the energetic field of our lives. While some objects in the home serve to uplift, honor, or inspire, others operate as anchors, not in the grounding sense, but in the way that keeps a ship tethered to an old harbor, unable to sail toward new destinations. Feng Shui is concerned not only with what is seen, but with what is felt. And any object that evokes a sense of heaviness, hesitation, or emotional contraction becomes a point of stagnation. In simple terms, you cannot expect fresh opportunity, new energy, or expanded prosperity to enter a space that is still energetically hosting unresolved grief or guilt. Take, for example, a souvenir from a relationship that ended painfully. Perhaps it's a framed photo from a vacation that was once joyful but now only reminds you of betrayal or loneliness. Maybe it's a piece of jewelry given by someone you no longer trust, or a painting that was chosen with a former partner who is no longer part of your life. On the surface, these items may appear aesthetically neutral or even beautiful. But beneath that appearance lies the emotional imprint of what they truly represent. Feng Shui recognizes that form holds memory. Even when the mind tries to suppress or reframe the association, the subconscious remembers. And every time you walk past that photo, glance at that ring, or dust that painting, your body absorbs a whisper of the emotional past. The result isn't always dramatic. It might be subtle emotional fatigue, recurring hesitation in new relationships, or a sensation that something in your life refuses to move forward. These are not psychological defects. They are energetic echoes. The key strategy in Feng Shui is to evaluate not by logic, but by feeling. If an object feels heavy, it is. This principle bypasses the rationalizations we often use to justify holding on. It was expensive. It's just decoration. It was a gift. But in Feng Shui, the value of an object is not measured by cost, history, or obligation. It is measured by its energetic weight. And if that weight pulls your mood downward, narrows your focus, or connects you to a version of yourself that you've outgrown, then its continued presence in your space is not benign. It's limiting. To address this, the first and most important step is honesty. Walk through your home with no agenda other than to feel. Notice what contracts your energy. Pay attention to the objects you avoid looking at directly. These are often the most energetically loaded. Once identified, you have two choices: removal or ritualized containment. Removing the object entirely is the most direct path. Donate it, sell it, recycle it, or if its energy feels truly toxic, dispose of it with finality. Some people fear that discarding such items is disrespectful or emotionally cold. But in Feng Shui, this act is not one of rejection. It is one of energetic liberation. You are not discarding the memory. You are simply choosing not to relive it through an object every day. You are choosing presence over pain, clarity over nostalgia, movement over mourning. If, for emotional or logistical reasons, you are not ready to release the object, the next best option is to neutralize its energetic field. This means placing it in a closed container, ideally a wooden box, which carries the wood element's transformative and restorative energy, and storing it in a location that is not in daily circulation. The act of containment signals that the object's influence is being respectfully paused. It is no longer given free range to affect the mood or momentum of the space. Do not underestimate the power of this shift. Even the act of wrapping the item gently, labeling it, and placing it into symbolic hibernation can reset your home's energy. It creates a boundary between the past and the present, allowing your living space to stop echoing what no longer supports you. In Buddhist and Taoist thought, reverence is shown not by clinging, but by letting go at the appropriate time. The wisdom lies in knowing when the lesson has been learned and the energy cycle completed. Objects that once honored love can begin to embody loss. Art that once represented achievement can become a monument to pressure. Gifts that once meant closeness can now symbolize estrangement. Recognizing when the emotional meaning of an object has shifted is an act of energetic maturity. Let's also address the phenomenon of guilt decor, items we keep on display not because we like them or feel inspired by them, but because we feel obligated. Perhaps it's a painting inherited from a relative you didn't really connect with, or a piece of furniture gifted by someone whose presence in your life is now complicated. You may tell yourself that removing it would be disrespectful, that it belongs there because of tradition, family expectations, or the price tag. But the energetic reality is that guilt is not a nourishing emotion. When it becomes the reason for design, it infects the environment with passive resistance. Feng Shui does not advocate coldness or ungratefulness, but it does require integrity. If an object does not support your energy today, it should not dictate the structure of your tomorrow. One way to resolve this is by relocating the item to a space that honors its origin without disrupting your daily flow. A guest room, a study, or a hallway shelf may serve as a compromise, still present but not dominant. Alternatively, take a photograph of the item before releasing it, allowing you to preserve the memory without maintaining the energetic tether. There's also a strategic way to energetically neutralize items that are tied to sadness but still hold beauty. Cleanse them with intention, wipe them with salt water, burn sandalwood incense nearby, or place them in direct sunlight for a day. These symbolic gestures, while subtle, recalibrate the object's energetic field. They strip away residue and invite renewal. The object, after being ritually cleared, may feel lighter. If it does not, then your decision is clear. In Feng Shui, energy doesn't lie, even when sentiment does. The most insidious impact of retaining emotionally negative objects is not their weight, but the way they block incoming energy. They create energetic squatters, vibrations occupying a home that are no longer aligned with the homeowner's growth. As a result, there's no room for the new to enter. New relationships may feel out of sync. Financial upgrades may stall. Creative ideas may feel empty or inconsistent. The space becomes energetically full, but spiritually malnourished. Think of it like a shelf crammed with expired food. It may be full, but it cannot nourish. The act of clearing negative memory objects is the equivalent of cleaning that shelf. It reclaims energetic real estate for what is fresh, relevant, and life-giving. There's a reason many cultures include space cleansing rituals after a death, a breakup, or major transition. These rituals aren't about superstition. They're about physics. Every object carries frequency, and when that frequency no longer aligns with your path, it becomes interference. Removing it restores coherence. In the practice of Feng Shui, coherence is king. When your home is energetically coherent, your life begins to reflect that order through ease, clarity, synchronicity, and emotional stability. Ultimately, this is not about becoming sterile or minimal. It's about energetic discernment. What you allow into your visual field affects your inner field. What you choose to keep determines what you continue to feel. What you feel shapes what you believe is possible, and what you believe shapes what you receive. So examine your space with honesty. Remove what no longer lifts you. Store with reverence what still deserves time, and make room physically and energetically for what you say you are ready to receive. Because if your space is still in mourning, opportunity will hesitate to knock. Energy goes where it is invited and stays where it is respected. Let your home speak clearly. I have released the weight of the past. I am ready for what comes next. Finally, your home is not just a shelter, it's a message. Every corner, every object, every forgotten drawer is speaking on your behalf. The question is, are those messages reflecting the life you want or the life you've outgrown? Feng Shui isn't about mysticism, it's about alignment. Alignment between your space and your values, between your daily habits and your deeper aspirations, between the way energy enters your home and the way prosperity enters your life. And that alignment doesn't begin with buying something new. It begins with noticing. When you start seeing your home not just as a place to live, but as a mirror of your mindset, transformation becomes inevitable. Not because of magic, but because of clarity. The more intentionally you shape your surroundings, the more intentionally life begins to respond. You don't need a bigger house to feel abundant. You don't need to spend a fortune to attract fortune. You just need to decide that your space deserves the same respect you're asking the universe to give your dreams. Clear one shelf, fix one broken thing, move one item out of guilt and into gratitude. Each small change becomes a declaration. I'm ready for better. Because wealth doesn't randomly fall into laps. It flows towards structure. And structure begins with what is under your roof right now. You don't need to start over. You just need to start. So as we close today's journey, I invite you to pause and reflect, not on what's missing, but on what's possible. If this video shifted the way you see your space, even just a little, I warmly invite you to share it with someone you care about. Leave a comment below and tell me, what's one thing you're inspired to shift in your environment starting today? And if you haven't already, please subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. Help me reach our first 2,000 followers so I can continue sharing thoughtful, grounded, life-enhancing Feng Shui content with you. Together, we're not just changing furniture, we're changing the energy that shapes our futures. Your home is already speaking. Now is the time to decide what it will say next.